Hey, Mike, do you ever sit down to put your shoes on?
All the time. Do you put your shoes on like standing up?
Well, I was online and I saw these posts, people saying the reason that Superman image wasn't hot was because putting your shoes on like that is like effeminate. And then there was like a picture of a girl putting on her stockings from like the 1950s. And they said like, this is why this picture's terrible.
I mean, have they ever seen a person? How do you put on boots? Do you just like tall old cowboy boots? Like, do people just like step into those or something?
Listen, man, I'm a dad, so it doesn't happen very often where I just get to sit down. But as often as I can, I'm sitting down and put my shoes on. But usually I'm running out the door and like throwing shoes on. But yeah, come on.
Like,
You get a nice bench. Oh, that's just the best. You just sit there, take your time.
like I have to sit down to put shoes. I don't know what.
I got a follow up. Do you think it's possible to look manly while drinking boba?
Yes, because I think it's manly to look manly while drinking coffee. And
No way.
The difference is really not all that, like the gap is not that wide.
Dude, we're powered up. Let's go. Welcome to Context Club, a weekly-ish podcast about all of your favorite video games, movies, comic books, and TV shows. Every week, we're looking into all the clues, context, and continuity behind the deepest lore and the most interesting facts about our favorite hobbies. I'm Evan Campbell. Joining me, as always, Mike Williams. What is up, dude?
Nothing much. It's been a day, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I'm so baffled that we aren't going to talk about Helldivers 2 today and that whole situation as it's kind of unfolded and continued to be. There's still chaos there. There's still a little drama there, as not all of the review bombers resend their terrible reviews of a game. That's mostly fine except for like a requirement. But yeah, we've got Superman news to talk about. We've got also, gut-wrenching layoffs to talk about. So let's get into it.
Yeah, it's going to be fun and famine, fun and sadness. I don't know.
To start off, we got our first teaser image of the new Superman, right?
Yes, David Cornsweet is James Gunn's Superman, kicking off his new DC Studios universe. I don't think we have a name, like a cool name. I think it's just DC Studios or something like that. And it's Superman. He's a Superman-looking guy, and that's a Superman-looking suit. It's been the response has been mixed, I'd say. Like generally positive, but also some negativity surrounding it, as you already brought up. Some of that is around the framing of this image itself. Some of that is around those diehard Henry Cavill people. And then some of that is just, specific issues or not with the suit. We can talk about the framing. The framing part, of course, is that Superman is there in his pre-dirtied outfit, putting on his boots. And I assume that that's like a reference, it's like, I'm just like you. I put my pants on one leg at a time. Like it's meant to, I think, evoke a more human Superman, while offering sort of a millennial, down on his luck maybe a little bit.
Sure.
Superman,
yeah.
Like, he's got it. It's like, man, I was just about to sit down and watch Netflix, and now someone's attacking Metropolis again. So I got to put the suit back on and go back out there and fight. I think probably my biggest issue with the image, is that the villain or thing in the background is shooting a beam right now, which means someone is probably in the path of that beam and someone is probably dying. I think the image probably would have worked better if you remove the beam. Like if you had a villain has appeared, then you get that feeling that I think that they were going for, which is, man, like my work is never done. Let's put the costume back on and get back out there.
Yeah. So this image is posted on James Gunn's Instagram. He shared it sometime this morning, I believe, and like as a teaser, essentially, and also James Gunn being the kind of new head of DC, right, ushering in a new era. We're kind of leaving the Snyderverse behind, and so this is our first glance. Before I start breaking this down and kind of touching on a lot of the things you brought up, I just want a quick we'll go around our very small table here. Do you like it? Like, do you like the image? Just like a kind of a blanket, like yes or no, and a one sentence. What's your kind of?
I like it, but then again, I've always, and a lot of people don't really realize a lot of this stuff. When you look at a lot of these costumes, what you see on the screen is not what the costume looks like in real life. Usually, they go in for a lot of these films, and you'll see them cut out the folds or add new bits onto the costume or something like that. So a lot of, I've seen, again, as part of the framing, some of the issues like the bunching up around the shoulders and stuff. Whereas if he were standing, or if this was an image for the actual movie, they probably would remove some of that. Whereas a real costume is actually going to do this.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think my initial gut reaction, my kind of like elevator pitch is like, I don't like this image. Like, I don't think it's a good promotion for Superman, and I'll get into why. But it's not ruined like my excitement for a new Superman movie or to see like Superman represented in a new DC universe. I think this just was kind of a swing and a miss for me, and we'll talk about it. But I mean, mainly for like a lot of the different reasons you're talking about, where that laser beam coming off, like it would have worked better if we somehow realized that Superman is actually moving at super speed so he can take his time to put his boots on. Like I 100% agree with you that the impression we're supposed to get here is like the everyday, he's just Superman, just another day at work, right? He's just got to put on his boots and go to work, just like everybody else. And I saw like people mentioning the farm. I also saw those like ridiculous comments about people saying the pose is effeminate and he doesn't look strong. And like that stuff is nonsense. I think there might be an argument to be said of like he's maybe a little too close to the Henry Cavill. Like if they were trying to get away from Henry Cavill Superman or create a new identity instead of extending the previous one, then they've kind of misstepped here because it's like kind of samey and the costume almost kind of samey, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, he is a lot closer to the Henry Cavill Superman. I think getting rid of Henry Cavill is not a slight against Henry Cavill. It's just the acknowledgement that if we bring Henry Cavill back, and it's the same way that's going to be with, like, for a while there was like, maybe Gunn will use Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Or
no,
Aquaman.
Probably not.
and the idea is like, let's do a firm cut on at least all of our biggest pillars. So like Jason Momoa's Aquaman is fine, but he's like a tether to that old, and they just want to cut that off. And here's, I actually have an image I'm dropping in the thing. I don't know if you can get at it.
Sure,
It's a GIF.
Let me grab that from you. I'll pull that up right now. This one here. This guy here?
Yeah. So you see, like, you have the filmed image of Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson in his appearance as Captain America the first time. And if you look over on his right side, there's like a seam in the suit. And part of the cut that they do in the VFX is they just tighten that seam up. The seam exists in a real life suit. And with that particular cowl, there's no way to get around that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of things that happen in a real fabric suit on a person. And then a lot of that you don't see in the final image.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly this is an image that's been photoshopped. Yeah, and it's an image that's been prepared for marketing. So there's room for them to have done things like that. And my
Yeah.
problem isn't really with the suit or it being dirty. Like I used to have conversations with my old comic book friends where it's like, we can't just have like old school superhero costumes anymore. Like they have to be like the Flash can't just be
Textures.
red. He has to be burnt red. You can't have Superman with a bright blue suit. It has to be like damaged or like military, like a military tech, right? It can't just be like these bright full colors that we're used to seeing in these comics. For readability, for composition and stuff. And in a film, it's just like it goes through the Hollywoodification, I guess. And so you've got to have these types of costumes and things. And yeah, I mean, maybe this one looks a little bunchy, but for me, it's let's look at the shot, the framing of it and everything. For me, he just looks tired. He just looks tired, or he looks like maybe he doesn't even know how to put his shoe on. And it's like also with this big laser beam, like it looks like he's having trouble like putting on his shoe. Like he's struggling with his shoe, like the same way like you and I just talk like we do when we're trying to put on our, like it's not exactly the best first impression. And then the issue with the laser, him seeming kind of disinterested in his job, right? Instead of looking like the guy who's like happy to put on his boots and get to work every day, he kind of just looks like, oh man, here we go again, another day. And it's like, that's not the vibe of Superman that I'm looking for. And I think Henry Cavill did have that layer of kind of like cold and stoicism, right? Kind of going for him, despite like some of the narrative arcs being like showing his kind of humanity side. It's like, I'm not really interested in that more alien Superman, right? Because the whole point of Superman is like, despite being an alien, he cares the most and he's human, like more so than a lot of humans, right? Like his compassion and empathy is there. And I think that's like at the core of Superman. And I just don't think that reads here. But at the same time, this is just one image. It's like a marketing image. It's like they thought it'd be a cool thing like to come out swinging with. And I think it just misses for me, I think, as I'm not even a big Superman fan, just like kind of a semi-Superman fan. And it's okay. Like this image can suck. It's fine. Doesn't mean like the movie's going to suck.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And part of the issue with marketing is marketing can go either direction. Like it's supposed to entice you, but it can go either way. For my money, my favorite is still, and I'll send it, is the Brandon Routh Superman from the CW version.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, there's your bright colors.
The return, and I think it strikes a good balance. Like a lot of people are like, oh, can I just have the flat stuff? But for a lot of films, like the costumes have to have texture and kibble, sure. To create interesting images. And I think that strikes a good balance of having that texture on the suit while still being noticeably just straightforward Superman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had a brighter, like towards the end of that Arrowverse, like Crisis crossover.
Sure. And the Flash TV show, I feel like, was a little bit almost there. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, they had a version of him, of this character, in a brighter, similar suit, actually. Give me a sec. Which I think, if I could see it full on, might have been my favorite.
Uh-huh.
Let's see if that loads up.
Let's pull this one up. There you go.
Which has, I think that's probably trending to my favorite. But I don't necessarily have a problem with Corin Sweat's suit in this image per se. Like it doesn't.
It's fine.
I see what they were going for, and they do have some good ideas. You see a lot of piping around the suit. And we have a comic image. It's clearly supposed to evoke, to a large degree, New 52 Superman.
Oh, yeah. Look at this suit. Yeah.
With the lines around the armor. He also has the collar, the higher collar around the neck, which a lot of the Supermen do not. Whereas New 52 Superman, if I remember correctly, this is supposed to be like pseudo Kryptonian armor,
Okay.
which is why it has all of the piping and lines and stuff. And the corn sweat image definitely harkens back to this, with the major changes being, I assume they started with that new 52, but the new 52 has a red belt and no trunks.
Okay.
And so the biggest change, I'm guessing, is they put a yellow belt like the classic Superman. And you can see a hint of it. The red trunks are there.
Oh yeah,
So,
look at that. Yeah.
So I think they started with the more modern New 52 look, even though that look has fallen off since they brought back the Convergence Lois and Clark with their son version of the character, and he wears the more classic outfit, and then Bendis brought back the trunks. But the armor look of the New 52 Superman, I think, is what they were starting with, and then they brought some more classic elements into that. And then as you switch to this image, so the thing shooting lasers in the background, a lot of people have assumed is Solaris, the Tyrant's son, who is a villain, an evil AI son
Yes.
from the future that is a Superman villain created by Grant Morrison and largely appearing in Grant Morrison stories. Solaris the Tyrant's Son first appeared in like DC 1 Million, I think, which was written by Morrison. And then this image is from All-Star Superman, which is one of the books that James Gunn like listed as inspiring this film. Solaris,
Not a bad pull. Like that's a really good book, right? Like it's well revered, so it's
yeah,
good
and
good footing.
I don't think that Solaris is going to be like the main villain. I would expect that it's probably just going to be a throwaway at some point. Similar to like, who am I thinking of? Batroc and Captain America and the Winter Soldier. Like at the very beginning, like Batroc gets his ass beat.
Yeah.
So I expect this is just to show like, hey, Superman has been around for a little bit and he does the hero thing, and that is just a part of his life. And again, I think that's the image they were trying
Absolutely.
to get across. That,
yeah, when you frame it like that, 100% you can see that of like, and also he's living in a high rise. He's clearly potentially been Clark Kent for a while and doing okay, right? He's not on the farm, and he, the suit is clean or not. Well, it's dirtied up, which means he's been working, right? But it's clearly there, as I guess what I mean. It's very present. So yeah, that's a really good read of I think what that image is trying to inspire. Saying like, yeah, maybe we're getting the kind of Spider-Man reboot version of Superman at this point, where it's like maybe we're not doing an origin story, we're just gonna get right into it, which I always appreciate that. Yeah,
and it'll be interesting to see how. But again, I see what they were going for with the image. I do not think it was the best framed image, and while I did not like the Snyder films, one of the things I will say is they were very good at, this is our first image of such and such. What do you think? Like the first image of Cavill was his Superman. It was a bit too dark, but it was him in front of a destroyed safe. And then I think his first Batman, the Affleck Batman, was like in black and white next to the Batmobile.
I think that's right. In the rain or something? I don't. Maybe not. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I know what you're saying though. Like the teaser images generally. I don't know, remember too, like the reveal of the Batfleck costume too, with the short ears and everything. People were kind of losing it, right? So yeah, there is a lot to talk about. You always, I think, would want that conversation to spiral in excitement, but I think with like comic book movies and characters beloved like Superman and Batman, there's always going to be people not happy with some things about it. I think just compositionally, this picture probably didn't achieve what they were hoping to, because I kind of like get what they're saying, but I think there's a lot of stronger ways they could have done both of those things, So
yeah, so that was the first Cavill image, and I will say part of the conversation has actually been people photoshopped out the the stuff happening in the background, and so it has become a meme where they're just putting whatever in the rear of that image.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yes.
we have to look at some of those. Let's see. Is there a hashtag for this? What are people posting? Let's see.
Here, let me find some.
I just find Superman background. Great audio. This is great for audio listeners, which, some people are going to do that. But let's see if we can find some. I'll put this in the video. I don't see any. I see one that's Vegeta shooting a blast. That's pretty good. Let's see.
Here, I got some. I have some.
Okay. Hit me. I'll pull it up real quick. Okay, so here we go. This one's Godzilla. Love it.
Yeah, so there's a number of those. I saw one with the Ava, the end of Evangelion part in the background. I've seen one with Cavill's Superman in the background. Let me see.
That's pretty good.
Let's see. There's the one with Campbell Superman.
Let's see. I'll pull it up here. Let's take a look. Here we go. Yeah, him holding the plane. Or is it like a rocket, right?
Pretty good. Yes, it is a Soviet rocket from, I want to say it's Batman v Superman.
Okay. Yeah, so people having fun with this stuff. We've seen it kind of all before. The lead up to these superhero movies can always be kind of fun, but it can also be disastrous if you kind of don't hit the marks. And I don't think they haven't lost the lead here by any means. Like an early teaser or full trailer, I think could really just, change the whole conversation, of course, because that happens.
Yeah, and I think it'll be fine. We also had we're not going to probably go over that, but Marvel Studios and Disney CEO Bob Iger both said, like, hey, we're pulling back on stuff, so we're gonna do 3 movies a year and 2 shows. Like we were doing too much, so, and I think part of that benefit is it allows Marvel to focus on making sure that the films and shows it does come out with matter and are good, and it also gives Gunn and co. the chance to step up and fill those gaps with good DC films, because again, I'm like a Marvel and DC comics reader on both sides. I want both to be good. Like I want good DC films. So I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. The casting has looked on point. There's some interesting castings out there, of course. So I just want to see if he nails Superman, because I really like Superman. Superman's one of my favorite comic heroes, and he doesn't always get the best shake in live action.
Yeah, I think it's a hard character to approach in a lot of ways, and especially if whoever's creating him doesn't get it. Like, dude, I remember watching the old Fleischman stuff like when I was like 3 years old, and that like really had an impression on me. Like I've loved Superman for a long, long time. I know earlier I said like I'm not the biggest Superman fan, and I think that still holds to be true, because at some point I discovered Batman and was like, oh my God, what is this? But I still have a reverence and a respect for this character who means a ton to a lot of people. So I hope they get it right too. And I think the DC universe deserves a lot better movies, especially considering the punching weight that the kind of writing teams at DC have done over the years with these characters. It's just different, Marvel and DC Comics, like it's just like 2 flavors of ice cream for me. So it's always fun to to dip into one and dip into the other back and forth. But yeah, I kind of feel similar to you. The Snyder films didn't really hit for me. So I want to see like what a real good cohesive DC universe looks like with really well developed characters. I'm sad that we might lose our current version of Peacemaker in it all of it all. But
I mean, they've already, I believe they're starting
there's
Peacemaker season 2.
another season, yeah.
I believe they're starting shooting soon, like for Peacemaker season 2, and I
okay.
believe Gunn is doing maybe like one episode as opposed to all of them this season, because he's busy on Superman, of course. But
Yeah.
We're not losing them. We're just they're recast within a new mold.
Okay.
But
New
it's
creative
gonna
team, you'd say. Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I mean, I believe Gunn still wrote every script
Okay.
for season 2 already. So it's still his baby. He's just not directing every episode. And I believe most of the cast is returning. So it's one of those like, oh, well, hey, we woke up in a new... to go back to the Arrowverse thing, it's like when the Supergirl, which was on CBS, got moved into the CW
Right.
world, and they finally merged it or whatever. I don't even remember what happened. But like one of those, like, oh, reality has changed around us.
I forgot about all of that. Yeah. Wow. Jeez. Okay. But I at the same time, I feel like if they end up keeping John Cena, and it's like everyone else's toys have to go except for mine. And James Gunn gets to keep Cena and keep Peacemaker as is, and then everyone else has to change. That's really funny. But I mean, if you're the boss, you're in charge. I guess you get to call the shots like that. So, and that Peacemaker show is very good, and John Cena, that role's perfect. So, I guess I wouldn't complain too much. Unfortunately, you have less. I don't like less exciting news to talk about, but important news. So earlier today, it was announced that Microsoft is going to be closing down Arkane Austin as well as Tango Gameworks, and then there's another studio that I believe is being kind of redistributed within like the kind of Bethesda or Xbox kind of suite of developers there. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Do you want to give us like a quick breakdown, Mike, of what kind of transpired this morning?
So basically, Microsoft, of course, recently acquired Activision Blizzard King, and like everybody else, things are not going too great within the industry. And so cuts had to be made. They already did some cuts at Microsoft proper and at Activision Blizzard. So now it is time for the Bethesda side of the studio. And that means Redfall developer Arkane Austin. So Arkane Lion, which is the other side of the Arkane Studios, is still alive and still working on Blade. But the Redfall team at Arkane Austin is gone. Tango Gameworks, who last released Hi-Fi Rush, is gone. And
Hold on, let me find that other studio name.
I forget what the name of the studio, but it was a smaller studio that worked on Mighty Doom.
Yes.
And they've been moved into the Elder Scrolls Online team.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And honestly, when I finally got to my desk this morning and hopped onto Twitter and saw this kind of just dropped, and there wasn't really a lot of or any explanation from Microsoft or Xbox for why this is happening. Obviously, we've been seeing a lot of layoffs this year. We've almost caught up to what month are we in? The 5th month of the year. We've almost caught up to the total of game industry layoffs that happened last year, if not caught up at this point with these added layoffs in general. But it is very striking when you see a studio like Tango Gameworks, who released Hi-Fi Rush, a beloved game from last year, a game that did something that Xbox has really needed help doing, which is to justify and be a perfect use case for why, subscribing to Game Pass matters, right? Like Hi-Fi Rush is a game that kind of just like prove the concept of Game Pass to me in a way that I don't think a lot of other games have done so far, right? They kind of like same day drop that game, like this is this incredible game that's out, and then it happened to be an amazing game, right? And so it's hard enough already, I think, to make a good game, but to make a good game and then for it to hit all cylinders like that and really like become the face of a success for Xbox as a brand, to then have that studio like just hit the curb like this just sucks. Like, and it's, I think it's ripped a lot of people up, like a lot of people in their feelings about this, a lot of people upset. And of course they didn't just make Hi-Fi Rush. Gosh, what's the horror game? Evil Within is also Tango Gameworks.
Yep.
And then there's also, did Arkane Austin do the Prey, that other Prey and Moon Crash, right? I believe.
Yes, they did the other Prey, the Prey reboot and Moon Crash, which was DLC for that game. And it's a shame because it was quite clear. Like I had hopes for Redfall, but it just didn't land, and it was quite clear that Arcane had just not, like, just wasn't the right game for that studio.
Yeah.
Like, it was a good shot, and it just didn't work, and it's hurts a lot, mostly because it feels like we're in a space where you can't really take risks and try something new, because any failure is punished with studio closure.
Yeah, and in this case, what was the failure, right? I mean, for Tango at least, I could see how people could even point at Redfall and be like, you know, this game severely underperformed, had a ton of issues at launch, and I think a lot of people blame Microsoft for that, and possibly rightfully so. But I think the thing that everyone forgets is that game had already been in development for years when the acquisition happened, right? So that game, you know, comes from Bethesda Studios, and then it's like wrapped up in the acquisition, and then Microsoft kind of just is like, well, let's publish this thing out because we probably want to put this team on something else, making new like exclusive IP for Xbox and for the Xbox brand. At least that was like kind of my thinking behind it, why this game could have gotten rushed out. It did get pushed. They did push it up a little bit, but it's clear that that game either needed a lot more work, right? Like probably more time than they were willing to give it, or, you know, if they couldn't find like the core fun in it, probably some significant changes, if not to kind of be like reconfigured in something else or rebooted into something else was kind of the kind of the sense I get after we kind of got the launch and some introspective into how development went. There's a couple of pieces I forget. I think there was one on IGN and one on Kotaku as well, kind of about the development of Redfall and what went wrong with it. And there might even be a Schreier join on that.
There is a Schreier article.
Was it? Yeah. So there's a
Redfall's development and the issues there.
Yeah. And so like so I get it on that front, but at the same time, it's like, overall, we know that there's been a lot of layoffs, and that's kind of been for the reason generally that these studios have been saying is like, we need to reallocate resources. The narrative is that a lot of people made big bets during COVID and they didn't pay off because, you know, everybody left quarantine and now there's not as many people playing video games, despite the video game industry raising like something like 30% revenue during that time, right? Like shot straight up to the moon, and then losing only 1% the year after quarantine kind of lifted. And so now there's panic, right? And these studios are getting laid off, and these companies and executives are trying to continually make the line graph go up for revenue, cutting costs, laying people off, right? So that there's kind of this kind of excuse, right, of like, hey, we need to reallocate these resources, so we're gonna just shut the studio down. I don't know, man. Make it make sense for me. Like, I don't.
So at least for Microsoft, the play and method to their madness right now is, it for quite a while, Game Pass was the thing. You're buying up all of these different things, different studios, so that you can have a wide variety of different games to put on Game Pass to make your Netflix of games look great. But it is clear that Game Pass growth has stalled, like the people who are interested in Game Pass, at least in its current form on Xbox and PC, they've reached a plateau. It's not going anywhere. They're not going up. They're not going down. No growth is bad. So Microsoft now has to choose a different studio path, and that overall studio path is standalone premium games sold everywhere. So sold on PlayStation, sold on Switch if they can. And we've seen a number of their games like Grounded, Sea of Thieves just came to PS5, I want to say this week.
And did very well.
Yeah, or last week.
Really well.
Yeah, it was pretty recent. But it just released on these platforms. And I think Microsoft is now being like, okay, so we were doing the Game Pass thing. That's a lot of variety. Release whatever you want. Now we're going back to the AAA model, the premium model, which you can call the Sony model if you want, where we need you to focus on the things that you do best, your biggest things, all told, and make it happen, which means Gears, which means Halo, which means World of Warcraft and Diablo for Blizzard, Call of Duty for Activision, and anything that is outside of that feels like it's going to have some issues. Like we have, and you can look at it sort of like the Fallout show hit. We were talking about this recently.
Sure.
And all of a sudden Fallout is big. Bethesda's hitting it out of the park with Fallout 4 and Fallout 76. People are coming back. Yay, it's great. And you have to think that Microsoft is looking at that and wondering, where's our next Fallout to capitalize on this? Where's our Fallout to be ready for Season 2, for Season 3? Like, what do we have? And Starfield wasn't it. And Bethesda proper is working on Elder Scrolls. So you have to wonder if Microsoft at some point is going to look through some of their other studios and go, why are we having you do your smaller own game when we can get you on Fallout right now and make some, which is the Sony thing, right?
Sure.
Like Sony is, PlayStation is very much, whatever you do, this is what you do. Insomniac is now mostly the Spider-Man and soon Marvel studio. They get to do a Ratchet and Clank every now and then, but otherwise it is Spider-Man and it is Marvel.
Get back in your Marvel cage.
Right.
Yes.
Sucker Punch is now the Ghost of Tsushima studio.
Sure.
Sony Santa Monica, I think, has gotten space out from God of War to try, please give us the chance to try something different.
And Naughty Dog's on their way there too, right?
Right.
Reportedly.
But Naughty Dog is also, it went from, I think we're pretty good with The Last of Us to The Last of Us show comes out and, we got another Last of Us in us, guys. We're going to start work on that one. And I think that's the kind of thing that you're seeing with Microsoft. It's great. And Square Enix recently had a thing, I want to say 2 weeks ago or a week ago, where they announced that they canceled a bunch of different projects.
Yeah.
And probably they're going to do the same thing. We're going to focus on the big stuff. We need you on Final Fantasy. We need hits. In times like this, if they don't see growth, business goes back to low risk, focus on whatever we own, make sure that it hits.
Yeah, it's wild that the second phase of this Xbox drama is this kind of return to AAA focus, right? Where particularly Sony was trying to reach out into the live service area, and Sony did the same thing too. Insomniac got hit with layoffs despite selling tons and tons of copies of Spider-Man, and that being a great game, like a fantastic showcase of what a talented studio could do, and they still got hit, and so did some of their other big studios. Guerrilla got hit, and that's like the reverence around the Horizon games, you like them or not, like they are absolutely stunning, and that tech is there in a good way. So I think that's why this feels so terrible. But also on top of that, to kind of go back to what you're saying about the history of these acquisitions and these studios, for me, the one thing that Xbox has been struggling with, despite owning something like 27 studios or having these 20 different like titled Xbox studios, is they haven't released a ton of games, right? We kind of been waiting for those acquisitions to pay off. You've got companies like Compulsion, Undead Labs, Double Fine. There's also Obsidian, right? There's a lot of developers in that in kind of that space. That Fable game is in the works. And these games just haven't come out yet. And I think fans have been waiting. And there's been a lot of good faith there, simply because even though there hasn't been releases, Xbox didn't shut these studios down, right? They hadn't been pulling the Embracer card where they bought a bunch of these studios and everyone said, just watch, they're going to start shutting these down because they're not making anything and they didn't produce any hits. But they didn't. They kept them around. But now, after today, go ahead.
And I think under the Game Pass model, the idea was good guy Microsoft, which is they bought these studios.
Yeah, sure.
And they gave them space. They're like Microsoft wasn't, and it's odd, but Microsoft wasn't stepping in to tell these studios what to do.
Almost too much space.
Right. They gave them resources and time to do. They were just like Phil Spencer at the head, good guy Microsoft, you do whatever you do.
Yes.
And the problem is, unfortunately, that doesn't always pay off. And under the Game Pass model of a wide variety of stuff, Game Pass growing, you're doing that so that you can have, in the same way that Netflix does, a ton of different, something for everybody.
Yeah.
Like there's always something to play for everybody. The problem is now when each game has to stand on their own, like if Game Pass is not your focus and sales are, then each game has to stand at your own and every game needs to hit. And that's like I said, back to the same with Sony or Square Enix or a lot of these studios, publishers, platform owners, you're seeing them go back to this. Like, no, every game needs to hit. And if it doesn't, we got to do something else.
The thing about this, though, is like even Square Enix divested, right? They didn't shut down their Western studios. They sold them. They didn't just say, like, you're obliterated. They sold off. I mean, I think there's probably some loss in there for sure. And they slimmed those studios down before they sold them. But at least, like, those brands and those studios, and unfortunately went to Embracer, and then Embracer kind of shit the bed in the most obscene ways. But like, yeah, I think that's what hurts here the most. It's like, you know, we hear even some of the Embracer stuff, like some of these companies are getting the option to like kind of get their way out of the shutdown and be either sold off or by themselves, essentially, so that they don't have to shut down. They can continue making games and they can go out and find their own money to get investors to publish in this stuff. But like to take it just feels like such a backstab, man, for Tango specifically. Like how could you do this to your like golden child, basically, when Starfield didn't hit the mark, Redfall didn't hit the mark, especially in the Bethesda camp, and here comes Hi-Fi Rush, like, don't worry guys, we got it, and they're just holding Game Pass up, like, oh, and now for this year to Xbox to be like, nah, you know, it's not cutting it, you guys gotta go, you can't stay here. It's like, what is happening right now? And like, I know I've already kind of expressed that, but it's just so hard for me to get over it. Yeah, go ahead.
So I've sent two, probably open the second link first, but basically the first link was and to show that there's a lot of other studios doing something similar, like in terms of not the layoffs part, although a lot of are, like Square Enix said in January, like, hey, we're going to, like, they had a year, probably last year, where they released, not last year, 2020, like 2022, they released a bunch of smaller games, Harvestella, Voice of the Card, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure.
Various Day of Life. Actually, yeah, they're listed there in the article, DOFL Chronicle. And they basically said in January, like, all right, we did a whole bunch of real small, interesting games that didn't necessarily work, didn't sell all that much. So we're going to focus on just big titles. And then last week, if you go to the second link there.
Okay, this is a Game Informer piece by Wesley LeBlanc. Shout out to Wesley.
Yeah, and they basically said last week, look, we've canceled, we're marking down $140 million in losses from canceling in development games. And those games are probably those smaller titles. And they're saying, look, the era of trying a whole bunch of different things is done. And in the same way that Microsoft is, I believe Ubisoft did the same thing and canceled a bunch of different other smaller games and then moved all those studios onto like Assassin's Creed. So like everyone is sort of like retreating from, the money is free, inflationary borrowing money is, flowing out there. Venture capital money is flowing out there. Do whatever. We're now going in the opposite direction, and it's no. What are our pillars? Focus on that. All the extra stuff, it's got to go. And that's coming to Microsoft now. And honestly, if I were some of Microsoft's smaller studios, like An Exile or something like that, I would be worried.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, what you're saying about these games need to hit. And maybe that's part of the strategy of releasing those bigger games or other games onto a competing platform like PlayStation and getting those releases day and date on PC because you can have a bigger splash, you can reach more people. But I think about like a Double Fine Studios, and if they're not working on like a Psychonauts 3, like a big budget AAA style game, they aren't making those types of games, right? Like they aren't making those games that are gonna hit. They're making games that would do incredibly well on Game Pass and incredibly well in the Steam store at like a $20 to $30 price point. But I just don't having the revelation today that now Xbox is willing to cut these studios apart. I mean, and we also saw this with Toys for Bob with the Activision side of things. Like you kind of brought that up earlier. But like now I'm just like, who's on the chopping block? Like, what is this just the start? The Band-Aids ripped off and now these studios are going to go down? Or have they clearly drawn lines in the sand between, well, we have Xbox studios and then there's those studios over at Bethesda and those studios over at Activision, and we can cut them up any way we like because, then we'll get our Call of Duty team, we'll get our what's the next big, our Indiana Joneses, and we're gonna get those kind of bigger titles from these studios, and we're gonna cut the little guys away, just there in those parts, and then keep the Xbox studios in place because they've obviously invested a lot in those studios. Like Compulsion had like a staff increase of like 150% or so. There's like over 100 people now that work there, and I think that studio was like 30 people before.
And there's been a lot of growth growth in all of these studios, and some of that can be said to cut back to smaller, more original numbers. The problem is that some veteran developers are getting caught in this. Like Insomniac got rid of some veteran folks when its layoffs hit. I'm sure some have in terms of Microsoft recently and today, of course. And the story I sent you here is Ubisoft doing the same thing as Square Enix doing. Like, we had some unannounced games. Those are gone. Like one of those that we knew of that was named was the sequel to Immortals Phoenix Rising, which was apparently pretty well along. And Ubisoft literally said, like, look, we're canceling these bunch of games. We're delaying Skull and Bones, which finally came out it's out now. Hasn't been doing much. But as part of canceling these other smaller games, Ubisoft said, like, yeah, we're going to focus on our big ones. We're focusing on Assassin's Creed. We're focusing on Far Cry. We're focusing on the main core things that we are known for at the expense of everything else, because we're trying to find that money. And it kind of actually, like, this focus on these main IPs also, like, it dovetails with this current move towards video game adaptations in Hollywood leading to other stuff. Like Ubisoft, if they drop an Assassin's Creed game, that's great. Assassin's Creed is a known brand, and if they get like an Assassin's Creed, like the movie didn't work, if they do like an animated series or a TV show and that works, then it raises the Assassin's Creed brand. It raises all ships. And that is what I think everyone is sort of looking at now. Like, as they get risk averse, let's retreat back to the stuff that we know works and see how much we can do of that, in addition to, trying to get it out into other media that will raise the view of it.
Yeah, I think it's really like clarifying to hear you lay it out in these kind of terms, and a lot of people online today aren't really like thinking in this framework, and it's, we didn't really talk about this before the show today, so it's interesting to kind of hear you lay it out in this way, because it didn't necessarily occur to me in this way that like this is the trend that's happening, where we actually are, like, as much complaining as there's been about like losing big AAA games, and AAA games are getting worse over time. Like, if you look on YouTube, this stuff is just everywhere, right? There's like a lot of doom and gloom surrounding it, but to see it be like, well, the industry is kind of cannibalizing itself to return to a model that we thought we were like well on our way to leaving, through games of service, through stuff like the Fortnites and Apex Legends and the games of service stuff. I mean, even stuff as old as Minecraft and that sort of thing. And it seemed like that was kind of the future, and people have been fear-mongering about like losing that. So to see, but also it's frustrating to see it, if this is true, which it does seem to be, like, for us just kind of get into this cycle of like, well, this ebb and flow of layoffs and studio shutterings isn't really a new thing to AAA development, to even like the video games industry. This is a kind of a pattern that's happened before with game development, where you've got developers who a lot of them get hired on at the beginning of a project, or in the middle of a project rather. Once you don't need them anymore, they kind of, you have your kind of your big layoffs at the end of a project, and then you need less people at the start of a project. So we've always seen that in the games industry, and now it seems like there's just a hyper focus on it. And because the game industry grew so much, the amount of layoffs are also more than we've ever seen before. So,
and it's all part of that big thing. Like EA did the same thing too. When we heard about the Dead Space, like, hey,
they're not going to do Dead Space.
Motive, we're not going to do Dead Space anymore.
2, yeah, they're like out.
Dead Space 2, we're done. Motive is, in fact, joining the Battlefield development team.
Oh my God, dude!
And they actually said today, literally, Wilson said today, it's like, hey, we have all these studios making the biggest the
biggest Battlefield, of all time, or something like that. Yeah,
the biggest Battlefield team.
Yeah.
Here. There we go. And like that's the kind of thing that's happening. Like, everyone, it's the same story everywhere. You're laying off to make a leaner team. Like, growth is hurting for everybody, so we're laying off to get leaner teams. And then we're focusing those leaner teams on just the main pillars. Like, what are the things that we are known for? Experimentation be damned. We're throwing all of that over here. Like, and I honestly, I just don't think it's going to work. Yeah. Not everyone can be a lifestyle. Like, people can survive like 2 or 3 lifestyle games, like maybe 2 tops. And everyone is going to be able to break that hold. So it's hard to, like, the people who are in COD deep, who are in Fortnite deep, like, your new Battlefield has to be, like they said, we're building another tremendous live service. Like, your new Battlefield has to be amazing, because people are already all of these skins and yeah,
You've invested a lot of time and money into the platform,
into
right?
that platform. Like,
Specifically,
if you are a COD player since Warzone has started, you are probably quite deep. You are at many hours in many battle passes, and however much you've paid on skins for like $15 a pop. And I don't know if those numbers are correct for Warzone. I don't play Warzone, but I'm sure they are.
No, I think I've seen something around there. Yeah.
So, like, your Battlefield has to be amazing, and
free.
It's just not sustainable. So, I think everybody's going in this direction. Like, smaller team, like, let's cut the head count and let's focus on just our biggest stuff, and you'll see that. As we've gone through these links at Microsoft, you've seen it at Square Enix, EA, Ubisoft, like, all of the major players are doing the exact same thing. And I just don't think it's going to work.
On top of it not working, what happens to all these people who are now looking for work, right? Like, it's losing on both ends, because when this type of stuff happens, you lose the veterans because they cost the most to have the leads and the experience, right? They have the highest salary, so they're usually the first to go. Then they promote from the middle up, right? But then it's hard for new people trying to get in, because these studios are dramatically decreasing in size, which makes the kind of fight for entry-level positions even harder. So there's more people than ever trying to get into the games industry, but less jobs. And so you're losing that kind of road for a lot of younger people to get in and then build that experience up, but you're also losing the top. So what we're kind of left with is people who have probably, honestly, like 4 to 8 years in the middle before they burn out and give it up. Like, it's frustrating, man, and it's such a bummer to see it happening, and it's a bummer to see beloved studios like Insomniac get hit with layoffs, beloved studios like Tango just to be completely shut down. Like, in the name of what? Like, what's go ahead.
And like, part of the issue is that you don't know what's gonna hit. Like, the most recent hit, some indie game called Manor Lords.
Sure.
And another one I've been seeing, if you go to, it might not still be there, but Steam top sellers list.
I do Steam charts, yeah.
There was a new game, Steam charts top sellers. It's still there, called Gray Zone Warfare, and it's been on the Steam top sellers list, despite being mixed reviews, for probably like 2 weeks now. Jeez. It's not a big studio. It's not like anything, but they're making money. But, like, you don't get to a Fallout. It's right there. You see right above Counter-Strike, above Counter-Strike 2 and Helldivers 2. That game, Gray Zone Warfare. That's not a big studio. That's just a game that came out of friggin' nowhere.
Yeah.
And is now, and has been on Steam. I noticed it. Let me see. I noticed it like 6 days ago. So it's been there, and you don't get a Counter-Strike, you don't get a GTA, you don't get a Ghost Recon unless you start somewhere. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't land on an Assassin's Creed unless you experiment. And not every experiment is going to work, but you don't know what's going to hit. Like, we don't know what the next Among Us is, the next Fall Guy is, the next Genshin. We talked briefly about Stellar Blade. I don't think Stellar Blade is going to do a ton, but the studio behind Stellar Blade has a mobile gacha game called like Nike Goddess of Warfare, which makes a ton of money. And like that's the thing. You don't know where the stuff is coming from. So if you only focus on your biggest games and you throw money on only the biggest titles, one, when they flop, what is your answer? But two, you're not growing anything new. You're not growing the next big thing.
Yeah, and I think some of the sentiment I've seen out there too from game developers is there has to be room to fail, because you have to develop a business that allows for everything not to be a hit, because like not every goose can be a golden goose, basically. You know, I'm not sure if someone had said that or I read that somewhere, but there was a Twitter thread going around where it's like, I forgot who said it, but
Pow World, the studio behind Pow World,
yeah, sure,
did like 2 other games. One was like Craftopia, and I remember playing that. And a lot of their stuff was like, let's do X but this, and like Craftopia was like survival game, but also like Zelda Breath of the Wild a little bit. And they had just been trying a couple of different games, and Pow World just happened to be the one that hit. And you need that. You need that chance to just like, let's throw out some, like, you need the hi-fi rushes. You close Tango Gameworks, but you need a hi-fi rush to, you need to keep making those games, because yes, maybe it was, one, it was critically acclaimed, but two, you're giving developers room to experiment, and there's a chance that the next hi-fi rush might be the next Call of Duty. Like, you don't know.
Yeah. What was the 2K Studio, that game that won a BAFTA too, and that happened recently, where they got cut as well, right?
Roll 7, and then the
Roll
other
7.
one, the other team behind Kerbal Space Program.
Yep, Rollerdrome, and the team behind Kerbal Space Program 2, which I know had like trouble development and like team switching and weird stuff going on with the publisher. But like Ollie Ollie World from Roll 7 is a fantastic game. It's an amazing game. That's just kind of a smaller deal, and maybe it didn't hit as much as they needed to, but like the fantastic, proposition for Game Pass, and Rollerdrome, won the BAFTA, which is crazy. But awesome. But yeah, like if you can't support these studios, don't shut them down. I don't know. Like if I guess what I'm trying to say is it's frustrating to me that we don't see more like divestment versus just like, well, no, this needs to die now. We're going to retain the IP, and the people, we're just going to throw them to the wind, because they're basically like, labor is a commodity to us, that we can just like buy and sell whenever we need, essentially, or cut it off whenever we don't need it. But I agree with you. Like, you're going to need smaller games to fill in the gaps between these bigger games, because big games take a long time to make. And I love AAA games. Like, I'm somebody who is not ashamed to say I really like AAA games. I like Uncharted and Last of Us a little less so, but I like the cinematic approach to game making as much as I like indie games. I love all that stuff too, but I'd love to see a studio just pushing the gas pedal all the way down to the floor and being like, look at this cool ass shit that we've been working on for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 8 years at this point now with some of this stuff. And, but like, you have to also make it sustainable, kind of like I was saying before, because you can't just grind these people in the dust and then lay them off, because then who's going to make the games? Right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is not to say that like smaller games is like the panacea, because indies are struggling too. Like,
sure.
You sent over when we started talking about the game industry layoff list, and if you look through that list, there's a lot of small studios that were just making games and then had to go. Spearhead Games is on there. We lost a lot of the Possibility Space people.
Now I've lost it. I'm looking for it. Sorry. What did I do with it? Hold on. I had it. I had it just for...
It's Obsidian MD. There it is. Yeah, so like there are small studios on there. Like Deviation Games worked with EA, but they were a relatively new relatively small studio, and they've had to cut their stuff. You got Radical Forge down there. It's just it's hard for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, here's the Take-Two stuff. The possibility space shutdown is worth its own podcast. Like, I almost started scripting a video for it. It's just so bonkers. I don't know if you saw everything going down with that, where essentially the CEOs blamed Kotaku's Ethan Gatch for the shutdown, saying like it leaked a bunch of information.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, so, but like that's one of the more outlandish kind of reasonings behind these studio shutdowns. And another thing I wanted to bring up was there was Mike Ibarra, who was the former president of Blizzard, I want to say, or CEO. I forget what the official title was.
He was talking about Phil Spencer's feelings.
Yes, he was concerned with Phil Spencer's feelings, saying like, Phil's a good guy, these are hard decisions. But the thing is, we never, and I tweeted about this, but we never actually get the info on what the hard decision was. Like, your choice was to shut down a bunch of studios, including Tango Gameworks, which made like a hit, right? Maybe not monetarily, but a success market-wise, a success like visibility-wise, brand-wise. You should just take away these people's jobs, or what? Like, what is actually the other, like, what is the hard part of this decision, right? Like, Microsoft or Xbox as a brand isn't going away. Like, are they concerned of like losing potentially their job? Like, is Phil Spencer worried? It's like, oh, either have to shut down Tango Gameworks or like I'm going to lose my job. And it's like, well, I think most people in that situation are like, if it's the choices between me, who's a well-off individual, losing my job, and 100 people losing their job, like, I think a lot of people, and maybe this is naive on my part, but I think a lot of people would take that hit, right? So like, I just never know what these executives are talking about. Like, it was a really hard decision to make. We had to shut down XY studio because this is just because business, right? And you never hear the other side of it. You never actually hear like, what's the damage. You have any insight or hypothetical ideas about like what the hard decision is in there? Like,
I mean, look, no executive wants to drop their pay. Like, a lot of people will bring up Iwata, but also Iwata was a pretty unique case in terms of a CEO, and most are not going in that direction.
Yeah.
So,
that reference, of course, is Iwata took a pay cut to allow his employees to continue to be paid and to work at Nintendo. His reasoning being that if his employees were concerned about losing their jobs or layoffs or like how well their game would do, then they would be making different kinds of games, and they wouldn't be very good at focusing on making good games. That's me kind of paraphrasing and putting that into my own words.
Yeah, and Nintendo is currently like riding high. The Switch sales reached like 140, I want to say like 143 million.
Yeah.
With the new Iris stuff. So like, Nintendo is doing so well that it is far outside of this conversation. Like, it does not really have to worry about being a part of this conversation. But
well, also in Japan, I've since heard has laws that prevent companies from laying people off. And
they do.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like, so they wouldn't do this at all. Generally, what Japan tries to do is they will sort of move your studio or whatever to either a different game, or they will put you on like menial stuff and then slowly strangle. If you look at, say, Sony's Japan studio, basically, like, when they were done with the Japan studio, they like slowly strangled them. Like, the people were employed, but they gave them less and less to do or put them on other projects until most of the higher-ups left.
Yeah.
Like, Japan studio had a bunch of higher-ups leave roughly around the same time. And then I think when they finally closed the studio, they moved Team Asobi out on their own thing, and then they just didn't renew work contracts for a bunch of people.
Oh wow, I hadn't heard that part. I knew they had scattered some of them off into the
And
different
then they
larger
moved them
studios.
into other stuff.
And
Yeah.
some, I think people went to Nixus or something like that, maybe for like supporting the studio from Japan.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
that's like, it's the same cuts, just in a very different way. Like,
kind of more long and drawn out. Yeah,
yeah, and then, you demote people in positions, and then they make a little bit less. But again, they're still employed, but it's not doing work that's meaningful to them. And like,
yeah, but at least at that point they
can
can leave on their own terms, right?
Right.
And they can go and they have space to go and find work. It's not like, hey, time's ticking. I'm not sure
And
what
you're
the
done.
severance. Yeah, not sure what the severance situation is. There's not a lot of clarity on also, Xbox announcing there was like 19 or 1800 layoffs. If these Bethesda layoffs are part of that number, or if that number was just Activision Blizzard, there's some rough information still probably coming through around that stuff. But yeah, it's better. I think maybe I don't know. In some ways, it's a slow death, like you're saying, but also to be able to have that time.
I'm sure you've been there. I've definitely been there, at a place that you're like, you feel the everything winding down, and the hurt, and you're just months of doing just menial grunt work that is crushing your soul each and every day.
Oh man, that's funny. You said, yeah,
Right?
no comment, dude. I can't.
Yeah, and you don't, but and that's like a different kind of death. Like, you're employed,
Yeah,
but you're not going anywhere, and that's what the Japanese side does. Like, we can't get rid of you, but you're also not like, there's no upward motion, there's no forward motion. You're just here until you give up.
yeah.
But again, Nintendo is outside of that right now. Like, Nintendo is one of the few places, but like everywhere else is like, even if you go down the list, Airship Syndicate lost 12 people. Hidden Path Entertainment lost 44 people. Like, everybody. I don't necessarily know what the answer is there.
Yeah. Sega got hit twice this year, I feel like.
Yeah.
Multiple studios got hit twice this year, actually.
And Sega is another one where Relic got hit, and Critical Assembly got hit, and Creative Assembly. Creative Assembly was working on Hyenas. That game was done. Like, they were about to release that game, and Sega cut it, and then apparently turned around to Creative Assembly and said, "No, we need you on 4X games. Like, there is a thing you do. Go do that. You don't, like, the era of experimentation is over. We need you to go do the thing that you do."
That's got to be frustrating when either a studio's given a chance to do something new or directed to do something new, and they're like, we've changed our mind, actually. Go back to your video game minds and produce something better. Like, oh my gosh, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, like, and if you work for like Creative Assembly or something like that, and you're like, we get a chance to do something that's not like, what is Creative Assembly? Total War? Like, we get a chance to do not Total War. Let's throw all of our stuff. This is great. No. Get back in those minds.
Yeah.
And make us some more Total War.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. So, like, I don't know what the answer is. Arkane Austin is gone. Arkane Line is working on Blade, but my guess is Blade is going to be like a maybe more action heavy Dishonored. So they are essentially working on the thing that they work on,
like Dishonored 4, essentially.
And this time, and this time they have a known IP behind it.
Yeah. Yeah, and you would think that's what was going to happen. At least my thinking was that's what's going to happen with Arkane Austin, right? Like, the reason Redfall gets pushed out in the state it does is because Microsoft is going to use their connections to put them on like a big branded thing, or like a known brand, or bring something back, right? Something like maybe even a Fallout, who knows, whatever, some established IP, but like, if the answer is like, no, this studio has to die, then I think there's a very good reason right now for any developer in the industry. Like, there is no safety. Like, make good games, get laid off. Make bad games, get laid off. Make interesting, unique, award-winning games, get laid off. Like, there's just no safety in it. And
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tango Gameworks was already pivoting to
something.
Like they had Ghostwire Tokyo, then Hi-Fi Rush. I would not be surprised if they were working on like an Evil Within. Like they saw the cards and they were like, all right, let's get back to doing the thing. And now they're not even going to get that chance. So it's like,
I think they quoted that Hi-Fi Rush wouldn't have happened without Game Pass. Like, they eked it out. It was like a project on the side that got big enough, and then because of Game Pass and the way that all worked and came together, was they were allowed to kind of go off on that tangent. And it was part of that studio head's plan also to help usher in the new like era of people to run the studio before he left. Gosh, he's a very famous Japanese developer, and I can't remember his name.
Shinji Mikami. And then he immediately turned around and started a new studio.
Yeah.
That is closer to what he wants to do, which was get some new voices in, be a little bit more like, hey, I am a veteran developer. I'm doing quite well. Like there's if you've ever seen the series, this YouTube channel is called Archipel. And they basically do like small documentary style interviews, very well produced with Japanese creators. And one of them was Mikami. Like Mikami is doing A-okay. Like part of the video is him driving a sports car around. He's fine. And he knows he's fine. And so I think you let me see. All right.
You can fire it up.
Because people should see these. These are Archipel documentaries is great.
I'm interested. I haven't heard of it, so now I'm really excited. As somebody who wants to do that kind of work too, like it's exciting to have a new outlet.
Yeah. So that is. I just sent you a link.
Okay.
And they've talked to people like manga creators, concept artists, but one of their earlier ones was Mikami. And he's doing fine. He's doing fine, but he wants to use that strength and chance that he has. Like he's a veteran developer. I'm gonna use my clout to give you a little bit more shine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another sentiment going around now from a lot of developers is like, how do we get outside of the system that is meant to basically destroy us? Like, how do we gain our own independence and get away from the reliance on these like megacorps essentially now that a lot of these studios
so that's a Ferrari that he's driving there.
Yeah, look at that. Jeez.
And it's basically just him, talking about his time in the industry. And these are very good. But he knows he's doing fine, and he wants to use his clout to bring up the next people that come after him.
Sure.
And give them a chance to experiment and give them a chance to grow and try different things and find the next hit. Like, you need those people. Like, you need the platinum doesn't become platinum without being at Capcom and getting a chance to grow and try new things and fail and keep going. And that's it. It feels like that's something that we're losing. Like, games just cost too much to make.
We've gone pretty long today, but I do want to end on that tweet thread by Dinga Bakaba, who's working on the next Blade game, who's at Arkane Lion. You know what? I'm just going to read this whole thing because I think it's a really good way to end the show. And this is coming from somebody who works in the industry, is in the top of his field, has made hits and works under the Bethesda and Xbox Studios umbrella. So I think what they have to say is poignant. So here's Dinga Bakaba. Let's get his. Here's Dinga Bakaba, studio co-creative director at Arkane Lion. He wrote, "This is absolutely terrible," in response to the shutdowns announced today. "Permission to be human. To any executive reading this, Friendly reminder that video games are an entertainment/cultural industry, and your business as a corporation is to take care of your artists/entertainers and help them create value for you. Don't throw us into gold fever gambits. Don't use us as strawmen for miscellaneous/blind spots. Don't make our work environments Darwinist jungles. You say we make you proud when we make a good game. Make us proud when times are tough. We know you can. We've seen it before. For now, great teams are sunsetting before our eyes again, and it's a fucking gut stab. Lion is safe, but please be tactful in discussing about all this and respect affected folks' voice and leave it room to be heard. It's their story to tell, their feelings to express. Inside baseball, but if I read, quote, immersive sim curse, end quote, from the community, especially from a fellow dev, I swear to God, please, let's talk about the real challenges instead of rehashing irrational anxieties of the past. This is a reference to the fact that it's hard for immersive sims to be successful anymore. The final tweet in this thread is even more inside baseball, but with a very, very wide range. As a wise and sorely missed man said, please stop, in response to all of the layoffs, not just today's, but basically the year's worth. Not really much more to say than that. I think that's probably like the most cohesive response that someone could have to this situation. So I think we're going to leave it there for today. Do you have any last words, Mike?
Nope. I don't know where things are going. The indies are struggling. Mid-range is struggling. And the corporate is struggling, at least on the side of the workers. So it's a struggle everywhere, except if you are a CEO, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one, maybe not a saving grace, but even to its detriment, like people who are creative and who want to make games or make content surrounding games, like don't just stop because they lose their job. And I think that's something to remember, is that some of these people may leave games forever, but what sucks is that these companies can leverage the passion to an extent. That's one lousy part about it, where these developers are going to scatter off into the wind and try to get hired at these other large companies. And this isn't by any means kind of a saving grace, but possibly a positive outlook here, is that like a lot of these people who feel super passionate about making good games are going to continue to want to try and do that. So like my hope, like you said, we don't know where it's going to go from here, but my hope is that some of these people find each other. Some of these people start their own stuff that's able to be successful, and that some of these people and all of these people find a new workplace to call home, obviously, but that at least on an upside, that their situation gets better instead of worse. And hopefully that, I think a lot more on a larger scale, the industry in general and developers in general start also kind of confronting, like Dinga Bakaba said, the kind of real issues and trying to understand how to confront them and how to get out from under this thumb and being put in these situations. To some extent, it's impossible, right? We're always going to have these large companies to make these huge budget games. But at the same time, there's probably some things that we can do to maybe as an industry, via unions and that sort of thing. Also, again, not the perfect Band-Aid. Yeah, go ahead.
And I mean, be prepared. More shoes are going to drop. We had the Embracer shoe drop, and a lot of people haven't realized a number of their favorite Japanese developers ended up making their own studios with backing from either Tencent or NetEase, that are Chinese companies, and both companies are doing fine right now, but also there was a short blip a while when China changed some of their regional rules involving gaming, and Tencent and NetEase took a hit. So again, a lot of these developers that have moved out to do their own thing, to have their chance to be more creative, to experiment more, to really reach for their passions, have their own sword of Damocles standing over their heads in the same way the Embracer group folks did. So
yeah,
eventually that'll either work out or it will not.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? So yeah, like we said, don't really know what's going to happen. Just support creators, support individual creators, support individual devs where you can. keep playing games and try to keep your head up, but be mindful of all this stuff going on for sure too, because I think it matters, and try as often as you can to send positive messages to like on videos you like and to game developers you like, because there's definitely a shortage of that on the internet, and I think it always can like help lift somebody up who's having a hard time. So yeah, let's leave it at there. I'm Evan Campbell at Darth Burrito on Twitter. Mike, you're at Automatic Zen on Twitter, and MH Williams on Blue Sky. I'm also at Darth Burrito on Blue Sky. You can check us out there. You can find us publishing videos here on YouTube weekly-ish, and eventually we're going to get to audio syndication for people who really want to listen to the show on their phones or when they're out on a walk or doing this stuff. We'll have Spotify versions and Apple iTunes version of the show coming soon. So stay tuned. We're looking forward to making more of these, and if you have a favorite topic or a suggestion for us, please leave it in the comments, and we'll catch you next week.